Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be going over part 4 in our series of holiday hacks this holiday season for 2022. If you've just joined us for the first time in a couple of weeks, please go back and listen to the previous 3 episodes. They're worth doing. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the fact that successful leaders, they are action-oriented. They absolutely jump in and get things done as opposed to waiting for things to happen to them.
Yeah, it's, again, what I like about these is on the surface, they seem very, very obvious. When we start to kind of like pull back the layers a little bit and start to talk through like, what does that actually mean? And what do we mean by that? I think that intrinsic motivation, that proactive manner, that kind of see something, say something, do something kind of mindset of leaders is really, really important. And that could be for somebody in a team member or somebody who works with you or for you that needs something in the moment, or they have a question, or there's something that's going on and you take action on it, versus saying, Chris seemed off today. I'm sure it was just something that's, everything is fine. And if he had anything going on, he would let me know. Mm-hmm. Versus the leader that says, hey, Chris, I know she seemed a little off today. Is everything all right? Like, do you need anything from me? Is there anything you want to talk about? Like, in my mind, that's kind of right where I go. It's like in the nuance of what you're observing and what action you take as a leader to go address something, versus let things fester or ignore them or be so disengaged that you don't even notice that something is different.
When I look at this, I think of a couple things. First, there is this fear by a lot of not just leaders, but people of making the wrong decision. And so the action taken is a lack of action altogether. They would rather let things continue to play out without their involvement than risk getting involved, taking action, and then looking back on it and thinking, ooh, that was the wrong action to take, because they believe that if they don't do anything and it goes the wrong way, they can somehow absolve themselves of the responsibility of whatever the outcome is. If you're a leader, you don't get to do that. You don't get to absolve yourself of the outcome simply because you didn't take action to do anything out of some kind of a misguided fear that you would do the wrong thing. You will do the wrong thing sometimes. That doesn't mean you don't have to do something or take action when there is a problem happening. It means that if you do make a mistake in the process of taking action, then you learn from those mistakes and you don't do the same mistake again, because you now have the equipment necessary to do it the right way next time, because you've learned from your mistakes. And this might fly in the face of what I just said a little bit, but sometimes the right action to take is to not take an action, but it is not done by saying, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. Having this being this action person and having that look like not taking any action is a deliberate decision. It's to say, I've weighed through all the options here. The right thing for me to do here is to let the next step play out without my involvement, because I believe that I won't be able to add anything productive to this. So you are still being an active participant in the situation, but the right thing for you to do was to not do anything yet. It isn't I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. And so I know that both things might look like just not doing anything, but the mindset behind it is very important here, because one says it's a strategic decision based on what you can or cannot contribute in your role and where you are in the moment, versus this kind of paralyzing fear that says, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to do nothing. And so I think it's very important to distinguish between the two, even though the outcome might look the same.
Right now, the amount of new things that are coming at leaders that we're learning collectively from a leadership standpoint that you may be seeing for the first time as a leader. Maybe you're a newer leader, so these are all a lot of new things that you're coming, that are coming at you. But maybe you're a tenured, experienced leader, and because of what's going on in general, there are things that we're working through from a leadership standpoint. But if you look at those things and you freeze in the moment, or you're not willing to put forth an effort to either learn or to discover more, or just to in the moment do something. I think right now it's such an important part, because I'm seeing more and more times in leadership space that leaders are being judged by those in the moment decisions. And a lot more often than before, it's like, did you do something? It's not even a matter of did you do the right or wrong thing. There seems to be a little bit of element of grace here. Even if you didn't exactly do what you maybe should have done, or it wasn't exactly the right call, the fact that people are taking action, or that a leader takes action, is starting to kind of, I think, seep its way up more into the judgment of being a good leader completely, versus those that take no action, or that kind of like try to delegate it or step away from it. I'm seeing more and more of that. So I think that those are things that are, that are really important right now, and are going to continue to be really important as we move forward, from an industry standpoint and from an expectation of leadership standpoint.
Yeah, I think as long as whatever action you took, that you can tie it back to something other than what was best for you in the moment, your own personal values, the values of the organization you work for, looking out for another employee or somebody who reports to you. If you can say that the action you took was rooted in one of those things, then yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of grace that is given to leaders who make decisions where you can Monday morning quarterback it and say, oh, you should have done this, but in the moment, a lot of people may have done the exact same thing that you did as the leader. They without the benefit of having the time to sit there and pour through all the data after the fact and look at all the different options, when they may have come to a different conclusion than you. Yes, I agree. Leaders are being given a lot of grace when it comes to that. The other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to having a bias for action, and this happens just as often, maybe if not more often, as those kind of in the moment, something has to be decided on quickly, is these kind of strategic priorities or initiatives that seem to stay in committee for way too long. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is have you ever been in a situation where you were amongst a group of people? They could be either people who reported to you or peers or even people who you report to, where the decision to move forward seemed to continue to be delayed because people still wanted to talk about the how and how what were we going to do next? How are we going to do this? And at some point in time, you start getting antsy of like, well, when are we going to actually just do? It's sometimes done is better than perfect, right? So let's just do something. And how did you kind of get through that or move things to the next step, seemingly in the face of a lot of other people who may have been really just not inclined to act? And so I want to ask you that question, but first I want to give it toward one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, how do you kind of move a team of people forward who seemingly have this kind of they're stuck in inaction, and you want to kind of move it to the next step and say, let's just get something done because we're talking about this way too much?
I think you actually do exactly that. You pause for a second and say, hey, like, we need to move forward because we're talking a lot and nothing's getting done. And it's not that I want to devalue your thoughts, or I want to tell you that your questions aren't valuable, or that we don't need to answer them, because we do. And the reality is, maybe because we're in this position, the chances of us being in this position are probably based on the fact that we don't have all the answers, or we're not exactly sure, or we have some questions about this, or we have some opinions about this. So let's make sure that we spend our time to do that. But this is one of those moments when this action needs to be taken. And so let's sidebar the questions that we have, and let's spend our time now in the how do we get this done. And I think that in those moments, and with a team and as a leader, being that transparent, being that clear about it, not shutting down the ability for us to have the dialogue, but shifting the passion and shifting the action to a space where it's going to help us get it done, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, I think kind of the buzzwords that I hear when I think it's time to kind of move out of whiteboarding and into actually action is when people start to say things like, I'd like to piggyback off of what Lorenzo said there by reiterating the exact same thing in a different set of words that doesn't add anything new to the situation. Like when you start to hear things like that, the same thing getting repeated over and over again, that typically is rooted in no one wants to say, let's move forward and actually do this, because they're worried it's the wrong thing. They're worried that they don't have all the information and that it's the wrong thing. And those are valid concerns. But But when you're not hearing anything new, when everybody has had the opportunity to speak or to, kind of give their opinion and contribute to the conversation before the decision is made and things are moving forward, and you haven't heard anything new for 2 or 3 or 4 kind of different people speaking and adding something, if what's being added is just a reiteration in different words of the same thing you've already heard, at that point in time, it's time to move forward. Because clearly it's not getting any better. You're not adding anything more. You need to kind of move from the whiteboarding stage to the action stage. If you're getting new data every time you're asking for opinions, every time somebody's contributing and people are actively contributing things that are new and that add more context to it, it's not time to move forward to action. That's a good thing, because the more data you have, the better. But it's not done over a period of weeks or months. It's done over a period of whatever that meeting is, and people have their time to speak for a few minutes or a few hours or whatever that meeting length is. And then it's, kind of a speak now or forever hold your peace kind of thing. And then as long as you have the humility to move forward later on and say, hey, you know what? We're going to change course a little bit because the information we have now is rooted in actual action and the results of that action, not just hypotheticals. We're going to change course just a little bit because now we're not quite where we should be. And now that we have this information that we didn't have before, we're going to change the way we're doing things. That's okay. The fear that keeps people out of action is the one that says that they've made up this story in their mind that says that once we move forward into action, there's no turning back. This is the path that we're on and we're stuck here forever. That is not the case unless you lack all humility. So be able to come back and say, you know what, we did things incorrectly. We're going to change it up. And you will remove that fear of moving on to action, I think pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a great call out in the element of follow-up. If you're in those spaces where there is maybe some hurdles to get through, or the team is stuck, or you're just trying to work through something that's going on, I think that element of follow-up afterward, and either adding more clarity, providing more information, or in some instances saying, like, you know what, this was the call that was made. This is what we were asked to do. We went and did it. And here's the reality. You were all right. This was probably not the best call. This was not the best decision. This was not the best strategy. I see that. I understand that. I appreciate that. But and then also, explaining though, but like these are going to happen. Like we're going to have these things where, we want to do our best to reduce going and doing things that are less productive or that cause, noise or confusion. But we also have to accept the fact that this is going to happen in the future as well. So if this happens again, what are other ways that we can approach this? Or like basically just continuing that dialogue, to your point, so that the team can have an element of trust and understanding and consistency with how do we deal with some of these harder decisions, and not just pretending like, oh yeah, everybody thought it was a bad idea, we had to do it anyway, then we did it and it was a bad idea, and I'm going to pretend like they never said it was a bad idea. Like you don't want to do that. You need to follow back up and clarify, because otherwise you lose a lot of just confidence overall from a team, and trust when they're just like, look, everybody knew it was bad and it was bad, and then they never admitted that it was bad, and that's just silly.
Yeah, and if you, on the flip side of that, if you do admit when things didn't go the right way, if you do come back and say, hey, yeah, I know that everybody believed this was going to go poorly, and we went forward with it anyway because we needed to do something and it was the wrong decision, that's not going to hurt your credibility as a leader unless it's happening over and over and over again. When it happens periodically, and you come out and say, you kind of acknowledge that elephant in the room and say, this is what we did and this is what happened, and we understand that the people who kind of called it out were right, and so we're going to change course on it. I think that actually helps your position as a leader in terms of people trusting you, because again, no one expects perfection. No one expects you to not make mistakes. They just want to know that if you do make them, that you can admit when you've made them and you can move forward together.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this holiday hack. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.